and welcome to Apochromatic Unlimited or APOCU for the 2025 Black History Month TTRPG fundraiser, where we are going to be raising money, hopefully a lot of money for Black Girls Rock, which is an organization and a movement dedicated to empowering and celebrating Black girls and women through programs focused on leadership, education, cultural enrichment, fostering self worth, pride, and empowerment. So each weekend during Black History Month, four great channels are coming together to give you a lot of great TTRPG content. So, Apochromatic Unlimited, Obsidian Brews, House of Dreams, and Nerdgasm Noir will be doing actual plays and panels to raise funds and to just show our passion and unity, all of that fun stuff. We want to give a huge thank you and a huge shout out to Transplanar RPG. If you have not heard of Transplanar RPG, shame on you. It's an award-winning, all transgender, people of color-led dark fantasy channel that is telling stories in a unique and original, non-colonial and anti-Orientalist multiverse. And they are proud to support Apochromatic Unlimited for Black History Month in this fundraiser. And we encourage everyone watching, and they encourage everyone watching as well, to give where and when you can. Um, as I do not have to tell you, uh, these are some tough times, and we just want to say we stand in solidarity with all oppressed peoples in the United States and around the world who are fighting for freedom, colonial against colonialism, imperialism, white supremacy, all of that nonsense. And we want to say free Sudan, free the DRC, free Palestine, and just cap that off with that all lives matter. And we'll give you a little bit more about that. But first, we're going to do some introductions. So I'll kick it off. My name is Stefan, or Umbral Knight X on the socials. Um, and I am a professor of history, and I have done work in the media area, but I also do work on marginalized groups throughout time, on film, on TTRPGs, and all that fun kind of stuff. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm here to talk about uh, and bring kind of a little bit of an academic angle into this conversation on Black people in punk spaces. So I will kind of go around to everyone, and I'm going to go with Ambrose if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ambrose. I go by any all pronouns. I am a award-winning TTRPG performer and storyteller, and I am the creative director and founder of Other Cider Studios, where we tell investigative and horror-themed TTRPG. Um, and it is an absolute honor to be here. We don't normally say it, but like we usually only have POC running either behind or in front of the screen in general, and that's kind of how we are going to do. We just do it. We're not going to just like talk about it. So that's just how we do things, and that's me.
Awesome. Dare?
Hi, hey, and hello. My name is Dare, pronouns she, they, they, it. I am the internet's resident trans terror. I'm mostly a problem. I'm trying my best not to be. Resident polyam princess, and I don't know, I do like 17 things in the tabletop space. You've heard of me somewhere. Um, yeah, I'm glad to be here. I don't know if you can't tell by the everything about me, but punk matters a lot to me.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you. And over to one of my favoriteest people in these spaces, Candace the Magnificent.
Hi, I'm Candace, also known as Candace the Magnificent. My pronouns are they, she. I am a TTRPG performer, writer, voice actor, and I do some other stuff too. That's currently escaping me. It's fine. Check my socials at the Candace and Marie on Blue Sky, and sort of on Twitter. Not really. And at Candace Magnificent everywhere else. I'm very excited to be here. I have been punk rock pretty much all my life. And getting here has been quite the journey, and I'm glad to be among such fantastic company.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Um, I asked everyone here to kind of come together, this lovely amalgamation of free people and gentle beings. And if you know that particular phrase that I just used, it's an oblique reference to something very old in the role playing space. If you don't know, track me down. You can ask me, or somebody here might ask me. Who knows? Whatever. But the theme that is going on for this event that's running all during Black History Month on these channels is punk, and just punk in general, cyberpunk, steampunk, solar punk, all everything punk. So you'll be finding games and events and everything related to punk. So I wanted to put together this panel so we could talk about Black people in punk spaces because, like so many other spaces out there, these are spaces where they have Black people have traditionally been excluded. Black people have Candace and I have had the conversation, and I'm sure some others here and many of you watching will resonate with this ideal of going to punk theme events, whether it's a steampunk event or whether it's a punk concert, and playing Count the People Who Look Like Me. um, and so um and and sometimes it's very rare for you to get out of the single digits. Sometimes it's very rare to get off of a single hand. um and so I wanted to bring everyone together and just kind of have a conversation about these spaces and our presence collectively as Black people in these spaces. So I just want to start off with kind of an opening question, and maybe whoever wants to lead off and say, when we say punk, what does punk mean to you?
I can start if you want.
Sure.
Punk for me is a lifestyle. It's obviously a type of music that you can listen to as well. But for me, punk is about authenticity. It is a social political belief system for me. It is one that eschews the status quo and champions the little guy, or the minority, and seeks to upend the oppression of people everywhere. Punk is something that I think isn't really even down to how you necessarily look. It's more what you do. Although how you look is fantastic to give that expression. For me, I think looking punk is important when I go certain places, more so than others, because there is an element of game recognized game, kind of. So if you're down with what I stand for and you know why I look like the way that I look, then the chances of you approaching me and being an asshole are pretty slim, right? Or at least that's the idea. That's not always what happens, but that's the idea. That's what punk means to me. Very much a socio-political ideology and resulting lifestyle from being somebody who does not stand for the current systemic racism, sexism, trans and homophobia that and colonialism that run rampant in our world.
Nice. Yeah.
I would say, like, kind of adding on to what Candace said, it's for me, it's kind of being against the grain in regards to that. So the best way to put it is I dress like this every day, kind of situation, or I dress similarly. It just depends on what kind of level of, like, how much I'm going to go all out or not, more than anything. And seeing someone else that dresses the same way as me feels like kinship. And then more so if it's a POC or a Black person that's doing it as well, because we are against all those things that are, like, kind of status quo in regards to that. And it's just nice to know, seeing someone, whether it's just visually or even just talking to them, because they're coming from a corporate event and they're like, this is what I dress like when I have to go to work, but this is not who I am. And then just talking to that person, I'm like, I see you. I can see you. I hear you, and I understand you, and that is a really wonderful feeling. to know that you're not alone and that you also understand what's going on around you. So yeah, I would say
Yeah.
that.
Nice.
And last but certainly not least, I'd hope,
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
like to, first off, the classic like college discussion thing of like, I second that. I'm going to jump off of both of these previous very good statements. For me, I like associate punk both as like the social political aspects, but also I think it's deeply entwined for me with the act of queerness. And when I say queerness, I'm referring to it specifically in like the bell hooks like context, which I have the
Mm-hmm.
quote here, like the idea of queer not as being who you're having sex with, that can be a dimension of it, but queer as being about the self that is at odds with everything around it, and that has to invent and create and find a place to speak and to thrive and to live. Like these two things cannot be untangled from each other for me. Both with the like way that I live, I am a trans woman. I am a polyamorous woman who is engaged to like two people right now, which is I have no real like marriage legality. Like it is an aspect of my life that I'm aware that I will always be against what is currently okay. And like I can't separate that from the aspect of punk. Those two things are just at the soul for me.
Yeah. I think uh, for me, I think it kind of, yeah, all of that. Yes. 100%. And I think it comes to mind, of course, my professor brain is going right to the professor things. And so for me, I'm going to give those people out in the audience who are watching this your homework. So if you have not had the opportunity, two things I would suggest you read are Guide Towards the Society of the Spectacle, and the other one is Dick Hebdage's book, Subculture: The Meaning of Style, and particularly that latter one where the author spent a lot of time kind of studying punk culture in the 70s and kind of writing about the distinctive style of punk, not only in the mannerisms of punk and the kind of pushing back against the status quo of punk, but also in the what we call sartorial codes, what you wear, those things when you see someone else wearing, you're like, oh, that person is punk, right? And so if you haven't, I highly recommend both of those. They're not, neither one of them are long books by any stretch of the imagination. um, and I think everyone here kind of hit on this particular element of and a lot of key elements that go into punk. And so I think for me, the next thing I would kind of ask everyone here is, when we now take that punk and we apply a prefix to it, cyberpunk, steampunk, solar punk, um, how do you see black faces kind of fitting into those types of spaces, um, and or even if you want to recount, if you're willing, any experiences you may have had in those particular spaces, and kind of how you interface with those spaces.
I would say that because I don't have experiences exactly with these spaces. Like for me, most of it is like, gonna be honest, music, like
Hmm.
punk music culture. But when it comes to like these genres in terms of telling stories or participating in storytelling in regards to it,
Hmm.
when I see it or I digest it, normally until just recently, it just seems that black faces are just kind of thrown into the crowd as like, see, look, like they exist in this world too. And I'm like, yes, what about their story, their backstory? How does their culture get added to this, like to this setting exactly? How does it fit in? Because like, yes, we know what our daily lives are and what our stories are, and now how do you put that into a fantasy setting, such as I'm more like used to cyberpunk, for instance. So like, how does that work there? Otherwise, just, oh yeah, it's just another person, another face that's randomly generated to be in a crowd and make it look more diverse. I want to know what their story is and how it changes because of this new setting, not like just to hit a quota. I would say that I got frustrated with it and made me want to change it in my own space, and that's one way to tackle it. But it needs to be a effort on multiple people's side to do that, in my opinion. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, for me, I often rub and like end up against like when it comes to discussing punk, both like musically, in the space, both as someone who is like a musician who like used to, kind of hard now, to go to house shows and stuff like that, but also like is someone who is deeply passionate about music, and running into like people who claim punk as like an identity and like don't like to acknowledge both the history of like rock music potentially like as culture, or in like its origins, or even the ways that like, yeah, like our experiences do shape our version of what punk is. Because like people like to, I think, reduce punk to a monoculture, but like it is also shaped distinctly by the individuals who are there, right? Like what is punk and what like is revolutionary for me may not look the exact same as somebody who is of a different culture, because like we have different cultural touchstones. Things that we wear that are rebellion for us are different. And that is the thing that like I have gotten into many a fight about, as well as things like just the straight up political idea of like someone who will claim like punk or be like, I am radical, I am this, this, and this. And then when we actually get to talking about like politics, it's like, are you though? Or like, do you like the vibes? And like when pushed, like when dealing with any pushback, you're not. And in fact, maybe far worse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that voyeuristic element, I think, is something that I feel is pretty active in the like subsections of punk. When I think about cyberpunk, the blackest thing about it is the fact that the creator is black, right? For an
Yeah.
RPG. Like,
Yeah.
so that makes it inherently black for me. So I co-ran a session, a small campaign of cyberpunk actually with Dare in it. Um with Piper, Maddie Matihi, as the lead GM. And one of the things that was really important to us when we first started to kind of craft that story in the language that we were going to use for the world that we were making for our players, like a big part of it was anti-Orientalism, right? Being very against the co-opting of Asian culture, particularly like, you know, Japanese culture, right? Without trying to assign like oh, well, they're so smart and all these like stereotypes of it's futuristic, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
keeping it separate from that was really important, because if you're gonna talk about punk stuff, you can't be going around stealing from Japanese people, right? You can't really, you have to
Yeah.
acknowledge where the culture comes from, as Dare was saying, right? So I think a lot of times that punk part of those games, like cyberpunk, solar punk, you know, fucking math punk, like whatever category that you have going on, I feel like most of the time it's very much divorced from the actual principles of what punk is, and rather seeks to, the word punk there is instead used to modify the word before it, right? So
Yeah.
taking cyber and turning it on its head, making it something different than it was before, right? Steampunk, taking that kind of steam powered world and corrupting it and making it something different, right? So like the active sense of punk still is there, but the spirit of punk is not there, because a lot of people run these games with no black people in them. They run these games without whole swaths of ethnicities that should be represented in a very large metropolis, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
there's no way you can have something that is actually going to be as inclusive as punk seeks to be, right? Based entirely on principle, and then exclude those people from the narrative. So I think like what I love the most about that is the fact that like we have been able to reclaim those stories and tell our own stories using those same frameworks. Um, all of my worlds are black, right? You're lucky if you get like a white NPC in my game most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I have to remember to make diversity when I make my,
Right.
you know what I mean? Because I'm like, if I'm showing up at a cyberpunk table and everybody's white in this entire city except for me, then surely my part of town is all black, right? Like,
Yeah.
so I feel like a lot of times people abandon what what it really means to be punk and to live punk, um, it like in general when they start talking about the subsections of it,
Yeah.
which is frustrating because like those are some of the places that often need the most reform.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
oh, if
No,
I
go
could,
ahead, Dare. Go ahead.
yeah, just talking about like the idea of like punk and the ways that like it can use punk as an aesthetic without actually using it with any like sort of teeth behind it.
Hmm.
I don't know if y'all remember like the sort of like mini discourse that popped up around the term hope punk in the tabletop space. Like it might have been like a year and a half ago, right? Of
Mm-hmm.
like people just like describing certain games as hope punk, and a lot of those creators who like tend to espouse like pretty punk belief being like actually don't call my stuff that because like that feels almost toothless or defanging or almost like a marketing term versus like actually accepting what this is. And like I think that is one of those things where like capital is so good at subsuming everything that like punk for many people even without interrogating it, and that's part of like the messy little evil of capitalism. It is aesthetic for a lot of people because they don't know that history.
Hmm.
Because like
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, especially in the states, really bad at teaching the history. You have to go out of your way or find an elder to like
Yeah,
espouse that.
absolutely, 100%. Right. Like, um, that touches. For me, when students are coming into my courses, I think of one of the things that I learned from one of my mentors when I very first started back into where I am now into teaching history, and uh, they said when you come to college, your college math professor hopes you remember everything you learned in high school math, and your college English professor hopes you remember everything you learned in high school English. Your college history professor hopes you forgot everything you learned in high school history. uh, because uh, especially in K through 12, there are so many omissions, so many things left out, and elements like this, right? That what we're talking about here are left out, and stories are kind of truncated, and then like Candace touched on, there are exclusions completely there. And I'm glad Ambrose mentioned that there are some changes that are happening recently. A couple of books come to mind. Everfair and Black God's Drums are a couple of books by Black authors that are in the steampunk space, right? That are kind of challenging these ideas as punk should of what these stories can be, right? And Cyberpunk is near and dear to my heart. I've loved that game since the beginning. When it first came out in the late '80s, I was ecstatic, uh, and then when I found out that the creator of the game looked like me, I about lost my mind because so super rare, particularly at that time. And so it's always resonated with me. And so uh, I'm sure by the time this plays, it'll have aired. But if you didn't watch it, go back and watch it. I'm going to be running a two shot of Cyberpunk as part of this a part of this event, and I am setting it in what was once Compton, Los Angeles, um, and presenting it very much like Candace said. We have a group of people. There's one white player in our group. It's otherwise all black faces, and so I think we need to actively demonstrate that we can lay claim to these stories that for some reason we shouldn't have to lay claim to, right? But we do because of the way the world is structured, and so here we are, right? Um, kind of treading over ground that you would hope if you go back and you listen to early punk, if you listen to the Vandals, if you listen to some of these very early songs, we shouldn't have to be going over some of this ground because there's this hint of rebellion. There's this, not even a hint, it's all about rebellion, right? There's these strains of resistance to the establishment that are absolutely so relevant now. Um, so, yeah, that's kind of just my connection with kind of riffing off what everyone here was saying. Um, so I think the other thing I would ask kind of around the table is that when you are looking into punk spaces, be it whether you're watching actual plays that have kind of these punk elements, or whether you're watching or listening to music or whatever, what is it about what you're consuming as part of punk that resonates with you?
For me, it's a sense of belonging. Um, when I was younger, like my mom was a physical fitness instructor. She didn't know that she was punk, but she my mom has always had about a quarter of an inch of hair on her head pretty much my entire life. She's always had muscles. She thinks that the sexiest part of a woman's body are the shoulders. She is all about a stylish penny loafer. If my mom were a young person today, I imagine that she would have some kind of different pronoun situation, and probably a girlfriend. Like I don't lay anything on her because she doesn't need it. She's perfectly happy in her life. But I grew up with a very different understanding of gender. I've never had to. I'm very lucky to have never felt policed. Like a lot of people feel very policed in their gender. So with me growing up, like the first time I ever saw someone in drag, other than like a cartoon or a TV show or something, my mom dressed up like my dad for Halloween and like met all my teachers. So the idea of like punk and the idea of living authentically and the idea of queerness, to speak to what Dare was saying earlier, that's something that's really kind of been free flowing in my life as a person since I was young. So when I got to like hip hop, and hip hop was like all about posturing a little bit, right? It's about talking big. It's about swagger. It's about, you know, trying without looking like you're trying, which does shake hands with punk rock, right? There's definitely an element of looking like you're not trying, but also trying very hard sometimes when you're punk rock and you're trying to like, you know, look the way that you want to. But I feel like there's like a very kind of um, counter perspective in hip hop that it is in punk, right? Hip hop is really like a lot of hip hop anyway, at least mainstream hip hop is very much about aspiring to financial greatness and wealth, right? There's very much that kind of element, whereas punk is like, I'm poor, so what? Fuck you. I'm still worth something. You're not going to tell me I'm worthless because I don't have as much as you, because I don't drive the fanciest car, because I'm not wearing the newest Converse, right? The fanciest whitest chucks on my feet. Like, so what if my sneakers are beat up? There's a story there, right? Like it's all about embracing who you are and kind of rolling with the good and the bad of life. And I think that that was something that really turned my head when I was younger. I was very much the kid that like always behaved and was very rarely grounded and never went to detention and, you know, did all of the right things, and was not rebellious. So to hear that rebellion in musical form, Dookie was the first album I ever bought as a kid. I had a little bit of money, and my mom took me out, and she was like, "What do you want?" And I was like, "I gotta have this. Like I've heard When I Come Around. I've heard fucking like the whole album. Honestly, I'd heard She. I was like, I gotta get it. I gotta have this, right?" And one of my older cousins, one of my older white cousins, had a Kerplunk shirt on one day, and that was like the first time I ever noticed it. And I remember like sneaking like after hours because I wasn't allowed to watch MTV, and seeing Billy Joe Armstrong for the first time, and he was wearing a dress and lipstick and eyeliner and mascara, and he was beautiful. Like he was beautiful. And I was like, "What is this? Oh my gosh, like who is this person?" I have an uncle that was goth at the time, little trilby hat goth with like a long trench coat, right? Kind of thing, like the eyeliner and stuff, the long hair in the face. So I had like a taste of the counterculture, but I hadn't seen something that like so literally kicked in the teeth of what was expected of you, right? Um, Billy Joe showed up as Billy Joe. It didn't matter that other people would, you know, call him the F word because he was wearing a dress. It didn't matter that like he admitted that he kissed boys and girls, right? And anybody in between. Like it didn't matter that he was bi. It didn't matter. Like none of that affected his music or this how seriously people took him. And I was like, okay, well, why do I have to pretend to like something I don't? Why do I have to be into this just because I'm black? Isn't there another way to reach out and connect to my Blackness that is authentic. So for a long time, I spent like countless hours trying to figure that out because like I think I'm probably the second oldest person at this table. Um, there were not a lot of Black and brown punk people for a long time. We were very rare. We still kind of are, but we were even more rare back then. And I think at first I felt like there was nothing but acceptance waiting for me in punk rock because like of all the things that they espoused, right? I'm reading books, I'm taking out, magazines from the library and stuff. I'm trying to use what little internet I have to, check out different bands and learn about them, right? I'm like, Bad Brains. I don't know if I like this sound, but they're Black people and that matters, right? Like Prince is a little bit punk rock. I like Prince, right? Like finding all these people that were counter to what was expected of them and me being like, I can fucking do that, man. That's awesome. But it built up the expectation that those spaces were going to be welcoming. And as a young Black kid, I can tell you they are not always welcoming. Sometimes you get there and everyone's like, what are you doing here? And you're like, I'm listening to the Vandals. And they're like, okay. And I'm like, they have a song about the lead singer's Black girlfriend. And they're all about fighting and doing the good stuff, fighting the good fight politically and breaking down barriers, right? Like, I'm here to break down barriers. And people are like, sure, question mark. And if I were to offer one criticism of punk rock to this day, some white punk rockers are some of the most fucking laziest fucking liberals I've ever met in my life. They take for granted that they are people who care, and then the buck stops there, right? They don't put that into words. They don't act and do punk rock, right? They say it and they read about it and they internalize it, but they don't. There's no output, right? There are so many punk spaces that are still not diverse enough, and you'd think that those would be the first places to be diverse. So for me, punk is something that's been very personal, despite it being such a large movement across the world. Um, it's something that I have found a lot of comfort and safety in, but and identity in as well. But it's also something that has been very much that double-edged sword where sometimes you get hurt because you love something so much and because you believe something so much and because those values are inherent to the Black experience for the most part, right? Like I live those politics every day because I am Black and I am queer and I am trans and I am all of these other things that make me different. So I don't really have a choice to show up, right? But some people do have a choice, and when that choice is exercised, it makes me feel very far away from punk in a way that has kind of driven me to discover that inside myself rather than trying to resonate with the community, so to speak. But TTRPGs have turned that around for me, right? Like sitting here talking to each of you today is a miracle that 15 years ago Candace would have been like, sure, yeah, you're gonna meet other Black people that like this and they're gonna be your friend. Yeah, like yeah, I think that's kind of what punk means to me at this point, especially as I age. um it's harder and harder to watch these like white punks grow up and like Peter Pan their way, or like Wendy Darling their way out of the lifestyle and out of the politic and out of the fight. Like it's okay.
Can you what was the question again? Because I just want to make sure, because I want to make sure because I loved all of that. I got a full like view into Candace, but what is I want to make sure that I'm like, I also would like to talk about this, but I just want to make sure. Oh, I can't hear you.
Oh, I had myself muted. Well, what is it about punk in any of its forms that resonates with you?
Oh, okay. I would say that like growing up, uh I didn't really have a sense of style at all. And that was just because I went to private school. So like I had skirts, button-ups, the tie that they had with it. Didn't like it, but it was uniform and I like uniformity. But suddenly was told, autistic kid, that like, hey, you're going to go to public school now and you don't have a sense of style at all. So all I had was sweatpants and like sweatshirts that were gray, and black. That's about it. And I met people in junior high school. that also did not have a sense of style. So that did not help at all. But my family, specifically my dad, worked at the library nearby. And that library had a whole plethora of music that you could rent out and listen to. And I ended up learning about music that way, just at random, just like picking like stuff up, things that I knew, things that I didn't. Evanescence was one of them that like hit me really hard in the chest. I didn't know why. I didn't understand it. My brain was like exploding. Of like her voice is majestic. What is she even talking about? What is happening right now? What is this called? And I wanted to find similar things that are called those things, or and I realized that like, oh, this is like rock. Then there's like subgenres of rock, and then there was punk. And I lost it. I think Green Day was like the thing that I listened to that like kind of set it for me. But then when I started like having work, like in terms of part-time work between high school, saved up enough money to go buy clothing that fit what I liked. And my mom didn't like it at all, but uh, she told me that I was the creative sibling. She's creative. It's fine. She can wear whatever she wants. And I'm like, mommy, uh, like it's more than just that. But okay, whatever you need to tell yourself in our family. And then I realized, because I grew up in Queens, New York, I was the only one that dressed the way that I did. Um, no one bothered me though, because uh, what did you say, Candace, said I was? That like, I'm like intense? What is it? Like what was the phrasing? Like
You have a quiet intensity.
I have a quiet intensity about me.
Mhm.
So I just stare at people and they just kind of leave me alone. So like that's what I learned to do in Queens. Plus, like I was a very good friend to people, so it didn't really matter what I dressed or acted like. But then as I got older, I realized what the sense of style I was doing was called. And I didn't really, not to sound weird, but like I didn't have a label situation. That's not how I worked back then. And I was like, oh, it has a meaning. It has a thing behind it. It is being who I am despite anything else or what I'm supposed to be. I think at one point someone definitely said, like, you're black. Why do you not act like you are? And it was a white boy. And this was like in college. Oh, shocker.
Yep.
But like, I was like, what does that even mean? It's like, yeah, you don't like listen to, like, I listen to like hip hop, but I don't just listen to hip hop. I don't have to just listen to those things. Why do you think I should? And it blew him away a little bit. He's like, actually, I don't know why. And I'm like, yeah, let's talk about it instead of being a dick. But but I realized what was happening, and then I just kind of doubled down on the style and then expanded even and learned more about the subcultures of it. So for me, punk didn't have a name, but it had a feeling more than anything. It had a vibe. It had a like standing up for the things that you care about, saying something that might not be kind to help somebody, or saying the wrong thing at the right time meant to disrupt, but not in a negative way. Um, like what is it, like pushing past the like what is it like uh I forgot what it's called, but it's when like you don't want to start a fight essentially. Conflict avoidant.
Yeah.
Like pushing past the conflict avoidance in order to do the right thing is something that I now live by on a regular basis. I feel that discomfort in my stomach to like I don't want to rock the boat. And then a little whisper in the back, but you know it's the right thing to do, bitch. So do it.
Yeah.
And I would say like I'm sorry, that's the best way to put it and how I
Yeah.
feel in terms of it. So yeah,
Spectacular.
All right, I'm about to yap, so everyone
go
should
for it.
stretch, get comfy. Yeah, I mean, like in terms of the way punk resonated with me, there's actually a very fun, I think, overlap. Both I think in terms of like types of history and like exposure to things, both with like Candace and Ambrose. Which for me, like I was born in Washington State, born in 1996. So like growing up, some of the early things I saw were like grunge and like big pro wrestling kids. So things like Jeff Hardy and like the Hardy Boys were like that sort of aesthetic of things that were like, oh, I never see anyone who looks like me dressed like that was like a super big pull. But also, I was a child money, which was zero. And like it just wasn't a thing like my family really cared about. Like I have always been teased for being like the white one in the family because of like my proclivity for a lot of this. So like growing up with that sort of desire for this thing, being deeply like neurodivergent, also being like big like rules listener, I always like felt a pull towards stuff that I like was always like that's not for me, but that's the thing I will look at longingly. I will yearn. And then I think for me, it was like a lot of my high school years, in which like I at least started listening to that stuff, right? This is like I have my own iPod. I can listen to my own music separate from my family. Um, and like the two things that weren't like inherently punk, but things that led me to that, which are going to be like one you'll understand, one you might not get for a second, which is like MCR. Namely, I was in high school when Danger Days came out, right? Which is an entire like thematic album of a group of like rebels fighting against this super core, like super evil corp. I have the Danger Days logo like right here tattooed on me. It means that fucking much to me. Um, and like Gerard Way being a like gender little he they who like you know made shit about death and was like all very expressive in ways that like I felt but never like could really talk about or like saw anywhere like super openly. That all resonated with me. Oop, let me. Hello. Am my words good now? Cool.
Looks like.
All right, beautiful. But yeah, like Gerard Way and like MCR being like big for me, like thematically and like aesthetically. And the other thing that I think was a big part, funnily enough, was like Tyler the Creator and Odd Future. And while their music was not like punk, I think in certain ways it was deeply rebellious and scary. To like a lot of like established idea of like what hip hop was or like what blackness was, right? These were a bunch of like young black like atheists who were all some of them were openly queer, a lot of them had a lot of work to do yet and they got there. Who were like all deeply passionate about making music. And like only a few years older than me. I think I'm like 2, 3 years younger than Tyler the Creator, right? So all of this like really hit me at the perfect age. I think I was like 14 or 15 like when I first heard Bastard and like Goblin, and those things don't necessarily hold up great now, but like that was still a thing that I never had heard before and completely altered my brain chemistry. And like getting to see like young black folks like that who are so openly brazenly like themselves really like did something for me. And even then it still took a while to like lean into like aesthetic of it, right? Like it took me going to school and dropping out of college, because I was a history major. Shouts out. And I dropped out because money is hard. But like, I ended up working for a thrift store for years, which meant a lot of my clothes were thrifted, right? And when you figure out what to do with that, that kind of led me falling into a lot of like punk and like subculture like ideas of dress. This jacket that I'm wearing right now, this is like probably my favorite and most iconic piece of clothing I own. This was a like Goodwill jacket that I have since removed the sleeve, stitched up 7 times. I've added a bunch of patches. I learned to sew or like to like sew stuff on this jacket. Like that's how much it meant to me for this expression. And like, a lot of I would say a lot of people could like know that I am queer just by looking at me, right? And like I think that also overlaps with my like genuine like love of history, right? Like I live in Colorado Springs. Very like it's a weird city where there's like queerness, but also lots of military, right? And like, getting to be like that black expression of queerness in a city where there's not a lot of people who look like me, it means a goddamn lot to me because when I run into people, especially ones who are younger than me, like who are kids of color, it matters to them. Every pride, like going out in like existing in space means a lot. Like we have a youth pride here now, and like I got to work there for a nonprofit thing this year or like last year. And like there was a lot of kids who saw me and that meant a lot to them because like there ain't a lot of us out here in the Springs, unfortunately. Um, and like, so it means a lot to me to not only take my queer and punk aesthetic and then follow up on that to help teach more people, right? if you're someone who follows me on like TikTok, I argue a lot. I love to argue, and I love to like argue, debunk things when I hear them, whether that is like about like whatever the current culture war thing is, or anything that I think, or whatever latest queer discourse, which is just the same discourse, like the same four things over and over again, like weighing in on those to give slightly nuanced, slightly older, slightly more experienced, like takes on this to help educate people on this, right? Like, I'm not by any means a queer elder, but like if you're 15 and you're hearing me, that is unfortunately, because that's how age and time works, I do get a sense of eldership, right? Like there
Yeah.
are people who have messaged me being like, oh, you were very inspirational to me. And that's weird, but like it's why I keep doing this, right? Like it's why I keep talking. That's why I'm here. I want to make sure that people younger than me don't feel that sense of loneliness, but also they can make sure people after them now.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, I also live in Colorado Springs, so can confirm everything that was just said. Uh, so for me, as Candace kind of obliquely hinted, I'm slightly older than everyone else here on this panel. Um, and for me, of course, some of you mentioned Green Day and all of that. For me, uh, my first contact with punk was hearing the Dead Kennedys' California Uber Alles for the first time in a long, long time ago. Um, and For me, I was like, what is this? Wait a minute. Hold on. But this was late 70s, early 80s. And um, some people here may be shocked to hear this, but sometimes human beings can have amazing cognitive dissonance. And so, in punk spaces at that time where I was in Southern California, there were a lot of skinheads, and a lot of them couldn't make the connection between who they were and what they stood for, and a song like California Uber Alles. They couldn't make uh, that connection, um, and so punk spaces were something that I kind of, in that time, kind of just circled because, like Candace said, there was a time when there were even fewer of us, and definitely at that point, um, there were not many at all. So I kind of um, was adjacent to a lot of punk spaces. I had friends who were in punk spaces and things like that, and so I would kind of be adjacent to them. And it wasn't until later that I was able to kind of experience those. And like I said, I'm old. I've been through phases. I've been through a goth phase, and I've been through a punk phase, and I say phase because like all of those things stay with me to some degree, one way or another. Um, what you see now is old Professor me. So, my wife, on the other hand, she, if you look at her, and she's got most of her hair shaved off and it's purple on top, and she's got the head tattoos and the whole 9 yards, but she works in the financial business, so she wears a wig when she's at work because she works in finance. So you know but see, that's just you do what you got to do when you got to make them bucks sometimes, right? um but for me, uh deep down in my heart, as someone who has always loved history and now teaches history, and as someone who has always loved uh, the concept of resistance and the concept of not conforming and the concept of pushing back against the status quo and the concept of things like California Uber Alles or Anarchy Burger or any of those that are like fuck the system, that those are things that resonate with me, that are coming from punk, right? That um, kind of come together, um, and just I feel when I'm in those spaces, I just feel this kind of like, I guess I can only describe it as kind of a background kind of sort of anarchic noise that is like to heck with the system, right? Um, and that's where punk kind of resonates for me. Um, so I think uh, um, thank you all so much for like coming together to have this conversation. Um, uh, so amazing. Glad you could all be here. Um, I think I'm gonna go around, have everybody say who they are again, um, and we'll kind of wind this thing down, and then I will flow into our little outro. So I'll go the other way. I'll start with Candace this time, and we'll go back the other way.
Hello, everyone. I have been Candace, also known as Candace the Magnificent. Very excited to have this panel. This is a wonderful time. I love talking to all of y'all on any given day, but in a panel for Black History Month is also delightful. You can find me at the Candace Marie on Twitter and Blue Sky, at Candace the Magnificent, pretty much everywhere else. If you like things that have a punk vibe or spirit behind them, may I humbly recommend Frequencies, which can be found on the Patchwork Productions podcast network over on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your pods. And if you want to hear more of me talk about the punk rock shenanigans of Octavia Butler's Kindred, or Interviewed the Vampire, hit up Barely Bookish to listen to my analyses. Thank you.
Dare.
Hi once again. I am wrestling with my cat, who is, I don't know if she's in frame. Anyway, if you enjoyed hearing my voice, which hopefully you did, people tend to say it's pretty okay. You can find me pretty much anywhere on the internet at Dare to Dream RPG. That is DARE, the number 2, DREAM RPG. I'm pretty much on every social. The brand is strong that way. By the time this comes out, my birthday will probably happen because my birthday's the 8th of February. So tell me happy belated at that point. But yeah, I am just kind of around. You'll see me. I'm here. Uh, I'm an entity that exists across space time. You'll bump into me if you're engaging in tabletops in any way, shape, or form. But I will say, check out Transplaner. My beloveds, I've been on there. Check out Campaign 2, the Chaos Protocol. It's incredible. Also, check out The Second Stranger because I'm in that one. But yeah, I think that's everything for me today.
All right, Ambrose.
Hi, everybody. It's me. It's Ambrose. I go by any and all pronouns. I am the creative director and founder of Other Cider Studios. I am an award-winning TTRPG performer and storyteller because a lot of my friends tell me to remind myself to say that I am also a storyteller that has been awarded. Yay. I am the keeper of the award-winning Arcane Core series, which will be continuing, and we will be doing a deep dive into the lore there, which I'm really excited about this year. And we are also continuing with The Melancholy Weave, which was a horror anthology talking about melancholic horror. I'm really excited about that. Yeah, I'm around. I go everywhere by SS Ambrose. That matters. I go by SS Ambrose underscore everywhere that doesn't. So whatever that means to you, you probably understand what I'm talking about. But it has been a wonderful time talking with these people. They're all absolutely fantastic, amazing, and I would love to continue talking with them whenever. To be honest, doesn't have to be right after this call or not, but truly, it has been a wonderful time talking to everybody here.
Excellent. Thank you. And I am Stefan once again, Umbral Knight X on the socials. And I use he, him pronouns. And we got together to talk about Black people in punk spaces. And we talked about a lot of different things. Some of the things you may think, and I went way back in the distance. So I talked about some things way back. And punk at that time had a lot of problematic elements, even some of the things I talked about. But I think that's one of the things about punk is that, and any media, right? Can you experience it and can you pull something inspiring even from things that might have had problematic elements in the past, right? And that's one of the things I try and do. I try and reframe things and send them off in new directions. Um, and I just want to uh, give a huge thank you. Uh, I want to shout out to all of the channels that are putting this together. I think this collaboration is a big deal, and hopefully you do too. It is, you hear a lot of talk about it, but it's very rare to see so many Black creatives be able to get together and tell their stories, and get together like this. And so I want to give a huge thank you to Transplaner for sponsoring this. I want to give a huge thank you to all of the channels that got together to organize this and put this together, which again is Apochromatic Unlimited, Obsidian Brews, House of Dreams, and Nerdgasm Noir. I think, uh, I'm going to hammer that home because so it's so important. To put these kind of things together, particularly at this juncture where we are in the world right now, and to get Black voices out there, even as certain people are removing this month as recognized by the federal government and all sorts of other nonsense is going on. Um, so this is us pushing back against that. So thank you to everyone who's organized this. Thank you to everyone who has been here and talked with us. Thank you again to Transplaner, and hopefully we can one day actually live in a world where everyone has the right to self determination everywhere around the world. Thank you all so much.